Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing some Dreamy Shimmer cards using the new Ombre collection from Lisa Horton Crafts. I have the Ombre Florals. We have the die as well as the coordinating stencil set. And you can use these as is, or you can die cut them and use the individual florals. And I'm going to do both. Then we have the Ombre layered shapes die as well as the coordinating stencil set. And what I love about the die sets is there's two dies for each. There's the inners for the florals or the layered shapes, and then there's an outer die. So the outer die for the Ombre Florals has a little bit of a scalloped edge with some pierced dots, so it almost looks a little bit like eyelet, and then the one for the layered shapes is more like a pinked edge. So I am going to be stenciling my backgrounds first, then I'm going to be creating my cards. So I have some Hammermill Cardstock on my Tacky Mat. I'm using some painter's tape just to hold it down. My Tacky Mat doesn't really want to hold my pieces down today. It needs to be cleaned again. They always need to be cleaned. And I am going to tape down my stencils. Now on the Lisa Horton Crafts stencils, there are the little tab with the holes on the left side there. If you have a Ultimate tool, those are perfect for those. You don't need to tape these down. You could put them on the posts in that tool and that works for that. I don't happen to have that tool, so this is what works for me. I use some painter's tape on the top left corner and the bottom right corner. So every stencil in this set after this, all I have to do is line up those two corners and I know it's going to line up perfectly. Now, because I love interference inks, I thought it would be fun to use interference inks for these cards. So I am going to be doing several on white backgrounds. And then when it comes to the layered shapes, I'm going to be doing one of them on a white background and one of them on a black background with the exact same inks, just to show you the difference between those. So for the first color, I use some lemon candy, a nice bright, vibrant yellow. For the second color, I used some fruit salad. Now, because this is the ombre collection, I'm creating an ombre look with these, but you certainly don't have to. You could do them in all the same color if you want. You could do just two colors and kind of alternate. So you have some different ways that you can use them, but I always love a good ombre. So I'm going with it and really embracing that. For the third color, I'm using some Tropical Paradise. So one of the things that I love to do with interference inks, and if you've never seen interference inks before, I have a whole playlist with them. They are like a magic ink pad. They have two colors in the ink pad, one that shows up on white or light cardstock and one that shows up on black or dark cardstock. And I love playing around with that with using inks or cardstocks. For this first background, I'm just using plain white cardstock. For the second background I'm going to create with these stencils, I'm going to be using white cardstock, but I'm also going to be adding some Hickory Smoke Distress in the center of the flowers just to give it a little bit of color variation. So we'll see a little bit more of that shimmer on the darker background. You could do, say, black soot or a black ink underneath it if you wanted it to be more dramatic. But for these, I thought I'd keep it a little bit more subtle. So I've gotten behind on my interference ink colors. The third one was Tropical Paradise, a nice vibrant pink. The fourth one was Lavender Fields, a beautiful purple. And now we have some Opal blush. This is a beautiful blue. So as I said, each one of these pads has two colors to them. So even though we're doing this on the light cardstock, we're going to see the color from the light cardstock. But when you tilt it into the light, you'll see that little bit of shimmer that typically shows up on the black or dark cardstock, but we're still going to see that on this. So we're going to have some beautiful shimmer to these blooms, which I absolutely love. This last color we're using here is Summer Garden, and I'm going to be using the same 6 colors for all of my backgrounds. I loved this color combination together, and I love the little rainbow look with it. So I'm going to keep this the same color palette throughout, so you can see it with the different stencils as well as just the different ways that I'm going to create with this. So this very first background was just the interference colors on the white cardstock alone. So when you tilt it into the light, you can see that there's a little bit of beautiful shimmer and sheen on those florals. So I'm going to repeat that exact same process, but I'm going to add a step to this. I have my Hickory Smoke Distress pad. I have a detailed ink blending brush, and in the center of the larger florals, for the smaller florals, it would just cover them entirely, so I'm not bothering with those. I'm taking my detail brush and adding some of that hickory smoke to the center. And like I said before, if you wanted it to be more dramatic, you could do black under here. Now I'm using hickory smoke. I will keep my pad fairly dry so that I have control over how much ink I add. The one comment I get back every so often, not super often, is sometimes people find that the inks bleed under those interference inks. And I never have that happen, but I keep my black pad and my Hickory Smoke pad fairly dry. You can always add more ink to it, but you can't take it away. It takes way less time for it to dry if it's a fairly dry pad. So that is my secret to not having the dye-based ink underneath the interference blend and bleed while you're working. So once again, for the second one, I'm using that Hickory Smoke in there, that first color. After I did the Hickory Smoke, I did the Lemon Candy. Now we did the Hickory Smoke and we're doing the fruit salad on top of it. Now, yes, you see gray underneath there, but there's also some centers to florals that get added to the different layers as we're creating. So that's going to cover some of that gray tone to it. And when we tilt it into the light, it just adds some visual dimension to those flowers. So now we're on the third layer, once again, adding that Hickory Smoke Distress ink. And my ink blending brush, my detail blending brush, is probably about a 1/4 inch wide. It's not super small, but it's also not a big brush. It's a good size for some of those larger flowers. I don't even bother wiping my stencil, and I haven't even cleaned my stencil off from my last one. Typically, if I'm going over top of that entire stencil with my gray or my black, I will use a dry microfiber cloth and clean it off. But because I'm using so little ink here, I didn't find it necessary. So once again, that last one, I did the Hickory Smoke and then I did the Tropical Paradise. Now we're going to do the Hickory Smoke and then we're going to do the Lavender Fields. And you can see it takes a little bit of extra time, but it doesn't take a ton of extra time. I'll show you both of the backgrounds together so you can see right side by side the different looks that each one gives. Now I'm doing the Hickory Smoke underneath the interference inks, but you could always use, say, 2 ink colors if you wanted to have a little bit of different color. You could always, say, do some Lavender Fields in the center and then do the Tropical Paradise on the outside and have kind of an ombre flower that way if you wanted to change it up just a little bit. So we're on our 5th layer here. I'm going in with that Hickory Smoke. Then we're going to go in with the Opal Blush interference ink. So when it came to this here, because there are some floral centers to them, for those floral centers, I did the entire thing in that Hickory Smoke. Then I'm going over it with that Opal Blush pad. So that Opal Blush pad, you can see the blue that we see on the white cardstock, but on the black cardstock, we see pink shimmer. So on those upper florals, we're going to see a little bit more of the pink tone to it because I've covered that whole with the whole area of the floral centers with that Hickory Smoke. This last one here does a lot of the different leaves. So once again, I'm going in with that Hickory Smoke. For the centers of the florals, I'm doing the entire center. For the leaves themselves, I'm doing the Hickory Smoke towards the base of the leaf and then just kind of blending it up a little bit so that we have a little bit of color variation there. That Summer Garden pad is green, but the interference color is blue. So on top of that Hickory Smoke, we're going to see a little bit more of that blue shimmer on there. So it just creates a really beautiful background that is just different from regular, say, dye-based or even hybrid ink pads because it has that gorgeous shimmer to it. So after that Hickory Smoke, I did that Summer Garden. And now we have this background completely done. And like I said, I'll show you the 2 of them side by side so you can see the difference between them. This one just has some more dimension to it. It just looks, in my opinion, just a little bit more interesting and has a little bit more detail to it. So I do a second background with that second technique with the Hickory Smoke off screen. I'm going to die cut that one once we get to it for our cards. But now we're on to the layered shapes background. So like I said, I'm going to do the exact same colors for this one, but I'm going to do one on white cardstock, one on black cardstock. Because these shapes are really small, I'm not bothering with that Hickory Smoke and adding that to the color or underneath the color. We're just doing the beautiful interference colors. This one here looks like party confetti, and I didn't think that doing the interference underneath it would be interesting at all. One thing that I think could be interesting is, say, doing black soot under all of it and then cleaning off your stencil completely and then doing the interference color on top of it, because you would get a completely different color. But you're going to see that when I go and do this on the dark background. So that first color, lemon candy, the second one was fruit salad, and then we have tropical paradise. And these kind of blend into each other, so we get a combination of the different colors intermixed with each other, which is great for celebration or party cards. This one here is the Lavender Fields, beautiful purple with that green shimmer to it. You can see that these backgrounds come together really quite quickly and easily. And by having the painter's tape in the top left and the bottom right corner, it makes it super easy to line up each one of these stencils. However, when it comes to these layered shapes, I don't think it matters if you get it off a little bit because it's just confetti, but it's just a fun background and perfect as a bright, colorful background. So we have Opal blush here for this layer, that beautiful blue with the pink shimmer to it. And then we have our Summer Garden. That's the one that is green that has the blue shimmer to it. Obviously, these colors or these backgrounds come together super easy. The thing that takes the longest is lining up the next stencil, but really that doesn't even take that long. Now, once again, because I'm going to do the same colors on the white and the black cardstock, I have not cleaned off my stencils. I'm just going to do the second color, the next color on the background. So we're going to see completely different colors on this background than we saw on that first one, because we're going to see the color that shows up on the black cardstock. So for this first pad here, this one is the lemon candy. This is the one that was that nice vibrant yellow on the light cardstock, but on the black cardstock we're going to see like a pinky coral color, because that is the color that shows up on the black cardstock. We're not going to see that yellow. That yellow is the dye part of the ink that is going to soak into the black cardstock, and we're only going to see the interference color. This next one here is fruit salad. So on white cardstock, we would normally see that pinky corally color. On the black cardstock, we're going to see the gold interference property to it. So these are just fun pads to create with. I have a hard time not using my interference pads on my project, really. They're just fun. I love the shimmer. I love the different options that they give, and they just make you think about inks a little bit different. So this one here is the Tropical Paradise. So on the white cardstock, we see that beautiful, bright, vibrant pink, but on the black cardstock, what we see is that bluey, purpley color, absolutely gorgeous color. And again, a fun one for doing just getting different looks with that same pad. This is the Lavender Field. So on the white cardstock, we would see that purple. You can see that on the stencil, but on the cardstock itself, we see the green interference to it. Next, we have the Opal blush that we would normally see the blue on the white cardstock, but because we're doing it on the black, we're going to see that pink interference. And I love the fact that even though this one has a pink interference to it and the lemon candy had a pink interference to it, they're different shades, so they're not the exact same color. So even with the interference colors, even though some of them look the same on the pad, they're actually a little bit different when we put it on the paper, which is fun. Lastly, we have the Summer Garden. So again, we would see green on white or light cardstock or on the stencil. On this background, we see blue interference. So such a fun one. And until you see it, it's hard to believe that these are done with the exact same pads. They create such a completely different look that's why I call them magic pads, because they are like magic. I love the fact that you can get different looks out of it. So off screen, I matched up my die with my second background. I actually was planning on taping this and I messed up with my taping. So it was a little bit challenging to line up that die. I just looked in the holes of the die set, made sure there was color in all of them, and it ended up lining up perfectly. I'll have to do it a couple of times to see if that was a fluke or if that happened by design, but they ended up die cutting beautifully. I'm not going to be using all of those die cut flowers, but they're going to be great for just creating some extra floral dimension on our background. For our sentiments for these cards, I'm using the Love and Hugs sentiment Stampin' Die set. Now I'm going to do the same sentiment set on all 5 cards that I'm creating, just to keep it a little bit simpler that way. But I wanted to have these stamp sentiments heat emboss with both black and silver. When I do stamp sentiments, I typically like to heat emboss them because I like the extra texture it gives. You don't have to. You could use black ink and then for the silver use silver ink. But I do think having that extra little bit of texture adds a lot to card creating. I will always look for different ways to add texture to my cards, whether they're stamped cards or whether they're die cut cards, because I just think that adds extra interest as well as something for your eyes to catch. So for some of these cards, black sub-sentiments are going to be suitable, and for some of the cards, silver sub-sentiments are going to be more suitable. So I'm heat embossing both of them. I will die cut both of them. Obviously, I'm not going to be using all of these sub-sentiments today, but what I do when I have excess sub-sentiments or sentiments, I put them in a little Ziploc bag with that particular stamp and die set or die set. That way, next time I go to use that set, I may already have some sentiments ready to go that are going to work perfectly for what I'm creating. So they never go to waste. I don't have to look somewhere else for them. I'll know with that set that any extra sentiments I have with that one are right in that package. So I heat embossed both of those, and they have a coordinating die with them that I'm going to use to die cut those sentiments. So I line them up, use a little bit of Best Ever Craft tape in order to tape that die in place. I always want to make sure that that die is going to stay exactly where I put it when I'm doing my die cutting, and taping it in place is the best way to do it. So easily we have a ton of sub-sentiments. So this particular set has a large word hugs to go with each one of these sentiments. You can use that larger die cut if you want, or you can use these sub-sentiments on their own. Some of them create sentiments just all on their own. I die cut the silver one off screen. Is exactly the same process as the black one. So I have all of those sub-sentiments ready to go set aside. So my first background here, I'm going to trim this down to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I have another piece of Hammermill cardstock that I trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And I'm going to use one of my interference pads to ink around the outside of that mat, as well as the shadow part to my hugs die. Now for all of my sentiments, I did the 2 layers. So I did the hugs as well as the shadow. There is a second shadow if you wanted to layer it up even more. I opted not to for these cards. I opted to keep it a little bit more on the simple side, but you could always add that extra layer if you wanted to have that on there. I'm using some Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle. So this is going to work perfectly for gluing that really narrow, thin hugs sentiment onto its shadow, but it also works perfectly for gluing our cards together. And I always love using liquid glue because it gives you that extra wiggle room to move and shimmy things in place. So once I have my mat as well as my stenciled background on top of my A2 card base, I can add those sentiments. And because that background is so beautiful and vibrant, we really don't need any more. So I just have that sentiment on there. So this is that first background that didn't have the hickory smoke behind it. So it just creates a beautiful, clean, floral background. Now I did want to have a little bit of extra texture to it, so I added some stickles just in some of those flower centers. You can add as much or as little as you want. I kind of feel like less is more, so I like having that texture, but I don't want overwhelming texture on there. So I just do it for those flower centers, and then I'm going to set those aside to completely dry, and it's just going to add a little bit of sparkle. It's an interference one, so it is transparent. We're still going to see any of the color underneath there, but it's just going to add that texture as well as that sparkle. So for the second card, I'm creating a shaped card base using the outline die from the Ombre Florals die and stencil set or die set. I used some white cardstock and die cut it twice. Then I used my score pal to score at 5 inches from the top and folded back and forth to make sure that I got a nice hinge there. Used my liquid glue to glue that top ½ inch, and we create a really simple card base. Now for this one, the mats need to be just a little bit smaller. So my Hammermill cardstock there, I trimmed that down to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. My florals here, I trimmed this one down to 3 1/2 inches by 4 3/4 inches. Doing it the regular or the way that I did the last card, you don't see the pierced circles in that background. I wanted to make sure to see them because they're just so pretty that it would be a shame to cover them up. For this card, I'm using the Opal blush for my mat as well as my hugs sentiment. So we're going to put some hickory smoke on the shadow part of the sentiment just to change it up a little bit from the last card. I wanted to create my mats as well as my sentiments with just different colors for all of the cards. I didn't want to have them all have the same color of mat as well as sentiment, just to keep them nice and kind of different from each other. We're having all of these beautiful bright florals. Why not utilize different ones in each one? So I glued my mat as well as my florals onto my shaped card base here. Now we're going to glue our hugs sentiment onto the shadow And then once we have it onto the shadow, we can glue that onto the card. Now, because the florals are all over that background, we can really put that sentiment wherever we want it to. The one thing that I do make sure to do though is I make sure it's not on the same color floral. So this one has the Opal blush for the sentiment. I made sure that it was not at the bottom of the card right over top of those Opal blush florals. I made sure it was an area where it was definitely a lot more visible. And once again, I'm going to add some stickles to the centers of the florals just to give it that extra little bit of sparkle and just take that background up to the next level. So once we have those stickles on there, I'm going to set that aside to dry, and we're going to work on the next card. So for the next card, I'm going to use the die cut florals that I created with my second background like this, but I'm also going to use that background die in a different way. I'm going to emboss those florals in some Hammermill cardstock to create just an embossed background. So I have my Platinum 6 machine here. I'm using the stacking for embossing a die cut. So we need that rubber mat that comes with the machine. We also need that gray embossing mat on there. Now this just presses that cardstock into the floral die. Now not all dies work for this technique. They all work, but not all dies look nice with this technique. It really depends on the background. This particular die, because there are florals all around that background, I just thought it would be nice. It almost looks like one of those quilts that has kind of tone on tone little stitching that just creates a really beautiful background, something that's just a little bit different. So we have that texture there. I'm not adding any ink to that textured part. Then we are going to add our sentiment as well as our die cut florals. So for this card here, I'm using the Lavender Fields, and my pad needs to be re-inked. So when I went to just go direct from the pad to the paper, there's not a ton of ink left on the outside part of that ink pad, so we can use our blending brush to blend that on there. I have to make sure to re-ink that before I use it next. Now we're going to put our card together. So once again, I have another A2 card base, and this technique would work the same to do a shaped card base if you wanted. I did one shaped card base per die set, but you certainly could do more if you wanted. I really love those shaped card bases, especially the die that is in the Ombre Florals with that almost like eyelet look to it is really, really pretty. So once we have our mat as well as our embossed cardstock onto our A2 card base, I put an acrylic block on there just to hold everything nice and flat, especially that embossed cardstock from the die. I want to make sure that any of those recessed areas with adhesive have some good contact with the cardstock underneath it. So I want to make sure that we have everything nice and flat and that can sit and the glue can start to set. So I'm going to put the hugs sentiment in the center of this card, the sub sentiment just a little bit towards the top, and I typically will tuck that sub sentiment underneath my main sentiment just a little bit. Now, because I use liquid glue on this, it has a little bit of forgiveness to it. I'm going to tuck some of these die cut florals behind my hugs sentiment. Now what I try to do, because we have so many different colors of florals, I try to put different colors beside each other. I don't want to put two yellow flowers right beside each other because we're not going to see them as well. We have a lot of options here. There's more florals here than I could really use. I mean, technically you could probably put it all on one card if you wanted, but I think that would be a little bit too much. This is another case where less is more. I want to have some florals on there, but I don't want to overwhelm that hug sentiment. I want to still be able to see it. So I tuck it underneath different areas of my sentiments, and typically I'll do it in odd numbers. Here I do it with 3 different clusters. Sometimes you could just get away with 1. I typically like definitely more than 1 though. Just depends on the look that you're going for. I'll start with some leaves or a stem of some sort, and then a larger flower, and then I'll start tucking some of the smaller flowers around it. I don't want to put the smaller flowers first because when I go to put a larger flower, there's a good chance that I would just cover whatever else I put there. So I want to kind of work from larger to smaller, but I also like to put some of those stem pieces behind everything. So those will typically be where I start with those stem pieces. And then we have a lot of different sizes of those florals there. So we can pick and choose a variety of sizes. And I want to do a variety because we don't want all teeny tiny flowers around there. We want to utilize the variety that we have. So once again, I'm just putting a little bit of stickles in some of those larger flower centers, and I'll set that aside to dry. But again, a different way of using that Ombre Florals die set by embossing that cardstock background as well as using the individual florals. So just because you can create a whole background doesn't mean you have to use it as a whole background. We have a coordinating die set for it, so why not use it to die cut everything? For this next card, I'm using the layered shapes background on the white cardstock. I'm using the fruit salad ink for my mat as well as the shadow for my sentiment. I'm putting everything here onto an A2 card base. This card is going to be another one that is super simple because the background is simple, but because we have lots of different florals, or sorry, different colors on that background, it's just a great celebration card. This would be perfect for like a party invitation, for a birthday card, just for something to celebrate. I think it's just fun to use that confetti like that. I think you probably even get away with using this as snowfall in the winter. I haven't tried it yet. They are different shapes, and they're definitely not snowflake shapes, but I think it could be fun to put this on a background with some like silver ink and then maybe a little bit of like the natural pearl ink. I think it would be really fun. So we put that hugs there with that sub-sentiment, and now we're ready to use our interference inks on the black cardstock. So that background there was trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I have another piece of black that I trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I'm going to use the Lavender blush, or sorry, Lavender Fields interference ink for around my mat here. And obviously I had to use the brush for the last time. I need to use it for this time as well. But again, because this is on the black cardstock, we're not seeing that purple, we're seeing the green interference for it. Now I wanted to use a different color for my sentiment, so I'm using the Tropical Paradise. And again, we're not seeing that pink, we're seeing that purpley blue color. So this is the other one that I used, the shape die. I used the shape die from the Layered Shapes die set. So this one has like a pinked edge to it. This one doesn't have the pierced holes though, so I can get away with using a little bit larger mats than I did for that shaped card. I used my score pal and scored it at 5 inches, folded that score line to make sure that it was folded really well, and then glued the two together. And now we're ready to assemble our card. So we're going to start with our mat with the Lavender Fields interference ink on it. And you can see that I only go around the outside edges with that ink. That's the only part that we're going to actually see. There's no point in inking the entire piece of cardstock because the rest of it is going to be hidden. It would be just a waste of ink to do all of that. Then we can add our sentiment to our shadow. And I kept the shadow for this white. We're going to see a little hint of the white cardstock from our shaped card base. We're also going to see the white cardstock from our sub-sentiment. And it's just going to show up really, really well on that black background. This is the one, or one of the ones, where I used the black heat embossed background or sub-sentiment for it. So that works well with that black cardstock. So here is our finished card. Again, a super simple one, but I just love the look of the confetti in those interference colors. And of course, we made it unique by creating a shaped card base. Those shaped card bases are super easy to do, and they're just a fun way to change up your cards in just a little way, making something unexpected. It really only takes maybe an extra minute from doing a regular card to do that shaped card base. Then we have our layered shapes background on the white cardstock. So again, hard to believe that those are two done with exactly the same pads, but because they're interference pads, we have two different looks to them. Then we have our layered florals with the embossed background and those die cut florals with that Love and Hugs sentiment in the center. Then we have our two with our backgrounds. This first one here has that Hickory smoke ink behind those interference ink colors. Then we have our shaped card base with that little bit of eyelet looking or lace around the outside edge. And then our very first one with just the interference inks on the white cardstock. You'll find everything that I've used listed and linked down in the description box below. And if you already have interference inks, go take them out and play. And if you haven't yet, I'm just curious what's holding you back. They're so fun to play with, and they have such a wow factor when you create with them. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.